here in Washington is Ray McGovern. His career as a CIA analyst spanned nearly 3 decades. In the 1980s, he chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and prepared the daily intelligence brief for U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Joining us from London is the political analyst and commentator Sukant Chandan. And also with us here in Washington is the former chairman of the U.S. Congressional Committee on Intelligence, Pete Hoekstra. He was a senior member of the committee that oversaw the CIA during the years covered in that new report. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Congressman Hoekstra, let me start with you. You do not support the release of the report. Why?
Well, for a couple of things. I believe that the issues that the report addresses, enhanced interrogations and those types of things, and what the U.S. should and should not do, that analysis needs to take place. What have we learned? What should we be doing in the future? But you need to do this in a bipartisan way. This week was the 10th-year anniversary of when we passed the Intelligence Reform Bill. It was a time when Republicans and Democrats came together on intelligence and came together on foreign policy. This report doesn't reflect any of this. It is a partisan hatchet job. Only Democrats on the committee participated in the investigation and
so let me get
voted for the release of this report.
Right. You dispute the details in the report, or do you accept what's in it?
Oh, I don't accept some of the details may be accurate, but the important thing here is what are the conclusions, what have we learned, and how do we move forward? And the report does nothing to do to answer those kinds of questions and give us more direction on what we should be doing in the future.
Right. Ray McGovern, we've heard a lot about how these enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, call it what you will, saved lives, prevented attacks. You didn't buy it at the time. In fact, you were so unhappy and angry with what was going on that you returned your intelligence medallion.
That's correct.
At that point.
Well, there are two issues here. One is a moral issue, and one is a utilitarian issue. After 9/11, the American people and the American government had a nervous breakdown. And they resorted to techniques that were not, that are shameful. And this report elucidates those techniques and shows, and the president has reiterated this, that we have to get on the path, back on the path of morality. So the moral issue is paramount in my view. Torture inhabits the same ethical category as slavery and rape. In other words, you cannot grant authorities for people to commit rape or to enslave people. Torture is in the same category. Human beings don't do those kinds of things to other human beings. That's why there's a convention on torture from the UN. That's why there are U.S. laws against it. It's not wrong because there are laws against it. There are laws against it because it's just dead wrong.
Tough words there. Let's go across the Atlantic to London. Sukant, it's been an eventful few days here in Washington. What does it look like from your side of the Atlantic?
Well, despite the fact that I'm geopolitically residing in London, I actually would advocate more on the behalf of the people of the Global South. And from their perspective, which is the majority of the population of humanity, there has been no war against terror or war on terror. There's been a neo-colonial war of terrorism against the Global South. Now, what happened post 9/11 is not that somehow the quote-unquote West went after these terrorists, because the West was literally in bed with these terrorists, because the global alliance of Washington, Paris, and London in the phony war on terror are the exact pillars which uphold terrorism, which is the Gulf monarchies, the white settler colonial state of so-called Israel, and the Pakistani military intelligence services. Those are the institutions which really give life to these terrorist movements. So what the global network of CIA torture dungeons was a classic mafia strategy to reorient their own proxies back on terms of reading from the paper that was given to them, i.e. do not war on the West, but war on the West's enemies. And in that strategy, they have been devastatingly effective, because since the opening of the Arab Spring, nay Arab Sting, we can see that these Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Nusra death squads have very much strategically and directly, in some cases, very openly in Libya and then in Syria, teamed up with their senior colleagues in London, Paris, and Washington, and devastated and traumatized and divided and ruined whole countries and regions. We're talking about Libya, Syria, Mali, Nigeria, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, and it goes on and on. So really, the United States is looking very silly and hypocritical and ridiculous when it's trying to lecture Socialist Korea, China, or anyone else about human rights, when it's actually a world leader in torture, also compounded with its own human rights abuses against the legal lynching of black people in the United States, and also with the millions of people who are in the United States prisons, largely black and so-called Latino people.
Let me ask you for your response, Congressman, on one aspect of this that Sukant just addressed, and that was, has the United States lost its moral authority in lecturing the rest of the world on human rights and calling on the rest of the world to observe human rights when it itself has been undermining human rights?
I don't, I mean, the response that we just got from London is unbelievable. The lynching in the United States, the rule of law operates in the United States. There are questions about, and Ray brought them up, and Ray brought it up in terms of, and I respect Ray's opinion. He believed that what was going on and what was being done by the CIA and the U.S. government was inappropriate. He characterized it as immoral. It was not a nervous breakdown. These decisions were gone through in a very contemplative way. They were reviewed and developed in the executive branch. They were reviewed and briefed to Congress. Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, all agreed in the aftermath of 9/11 that these enhanced interrogation techniques could be used and should be used on a very limited scale for a limited period of time.
But you were very critical of Congress because you said that this Senate report is a total cover-up of the role of Congress.
Yes, because this Senate report makes you believe that the CIA did this all as a rogue agency and did not keep people in the executive branch informed and did not keep people in Congress informed. I'm here to very much tell the American people that, and the rest of the world, that no, I was in meetings where these enhanced interrogation techniques were briefed to members of Congress, were briefed to Republicans and Democrats, and we all knew and had the expectation that if we opposed the use of these techniques and we thought that they were wrong and we believed that they would not help keep America safe, we had the opportunity and the responsibility to say, stop, you're not going to do this. And Republicans and Democrats walked out of those meetings united, believing that they were essential, necessary, appropriate, and legal to move forward.
Ray McGovern, the former CIA director Michael Hayden came under some fierce criticism in that report that was presented to Congress. Let's listen to what Michael Hayden had to say about that criticism.
The way the nation speaks to us is the president authorizes something, we inform the Congress, the Attorney General says it's legal, and the director of CIA says, I think this is going to be effective, it's worth the candle. At that point, you think you've got a social contract with the American people, not with a particular administration. So what's happening now? These folks having the rug pulled out from under them, people who thought they were doing what we wanted them to do, that's unprecedented.
So, Ray McGovern, Michael Hayden there saying that this was legal. We were instructed to do this. He points out the rug was pulled from under the CIA. Was the CIA essentially caught in between two administrations here?
Well, first let me say that I'm rather aghast that my colleague here, Pete, was fully briefed on these enhanced interrogation techniques. They were demonstrated in the basement of the White House, and at one point, John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, walked out and said, my God, should we be doing this in the White House itself? So that's one thing. The other thing is that it was sold as a bill of goods that these things would work. Now, on the very day that George Bush got up at the White House and talked about what he called an alternative set of procedures, later called enhanced interrogation techniques, earlier that morning, the head of Army Intelligence, U.S. Army Intelligence, had the courage to get up across the river at the Pentagon. And what he said was this, and I quote, "No good intelligence has ever come from abusive procedures. History shows that, And the empirical experience of the last 5 years, hard years, also demonstrates that, end quote. 5 years, the date was September 6, 2006, -5, 2001, when the first one tortured was an American citizen, John Walker Lind, who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So here's the thing here. Torture doesn't work. General Kimmons knows a lot more than Dick Cheney or George Bush about whether torture works. So why do they torture? I have the answer. You ready?
Go ahead.
If you want reliable information, torture doesn't work. But if your objective is to find somebody to confess to sending operatives from Al-Qaeda up to be trained in explosive devices by Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, torture works like a charm. And that's exactly what they did to this fellow Al-Libi. They sent him to Egypt. He confessed. George Bush used that right before Congress voted for war. And so did Colin Powell use that without knowing what he was doing when he talked about a sinister nexus between Al-Qaeda and Baghdad, which did not exist. So if you want unreliable information, let's face it, torture works like a charm, and we have ample evidence of that in emails exchanged. It's all in the report.
Okay. Sukant.